order the District Planning and Regulation Committee meeting on the 20th of August. If we start with apologies, please. Do we have any apologies to note? Neville? Yep. Okay. I think we move that we accept those apologies. Do we have a mover? Jason, Councillor Goldsworthy, second Councillor Cairns. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. The conflicts of interests can be reported for the meeting. No, not to speak of. No. Okay. Thank you. We move on to confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the previous meeting, Tuesday, 16th of July. That they be moved that we remove that they be confirmed as a true and correct record. Councillor Goldsworthy, do the seconder for that one. Councillor Blackie, all those in favour? Aye. Okay, there's no against. None against. Carried. Thank you. Any matters arising from those minutes? Is your opportunity? No. Look both sides of the table. No. Okay. We'll take it there are none. Deputations, nil. I know that we have one item here in reports, an item, just sort of a bit of brief preamble as Chair. I think it's important, probably, ability to welcome along to speak to this report. That this is a potentially a step in a process for an item to be moved on. So let's not get too bogged down necessarily in how this body has functioned before or how it might function in the future. That's a consideration, but this is just a step. So I'll probably just put those parameters on it. But firstly, just before we move to any recommendations or anything of that sort, Billy, would like to talk to any aspect of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, this report's about two aspects. One, information regarding the changes to the Act, which are documented in the report, and the second one is to look at the provisions of the DLC and how that could function in the future. One thing I'd like to clarify after discussing with the Chair just before the meeting started, the tenure of the sitting DLC members is in another report going to Council on the 3rd of September, so that's not part of this discussion. That needs to be part of this discussion.
Thank you. And similarly, as the same I've here, we have the motion on the table, but this doesn't pertain to the appointment of members at all. That starts with to a part of the report, isn't it? Yeah,
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I'll take it as read, and if there's questions.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Billy. Do we have the questions? Yes. Yes. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just thank you, Billy, for your report. And we've had a workshop on this as well. Just to confirm, under the so there's two parts to this. Either we adopt a recommendation, as you've put, which is the C, or we go to the D. My understanding was that there was the perhaps necessity to consider up to 2 new members potentially. That was the view I think that came the other day when the other meeting we discussed. If you could just confirm that. The second is E. Is there a necessity to have that there? And in other words, is there ability to appoint a commissioner already without E? And I just wanted to confirm that if the need required it. Can you just confirm that, please?
With the commissioner, at any time the council can put another member on to the committee. and appointments commissioners. And the first, I didn't quite understand the first part, Dan, if you could just repeat that, please.
It looks like he's gone for a moment, but I think he was asking how many new.
How many new members to put on?
I think that's what the question is.
So initially, when we put this report to the committee, we said 3 members. We had our workshop, and so we've changed the report to up to 3 members, and that's for the committee to put a recommendation to council after the discussions.
Okay.
Because our standby, I suppose that 3 members in an ideal world would be great, because it means that from a risk point of view, staff don't have an issue with forming a DLC if needed, if everything that's in this paper is adopted regarding appointing commissioners, if needed, if the chair and deputy chair weren't available. It takes the risk away if there's an urgency, and not many times are there an urgency, but for instance could be a funeral and a special licence comes in, chair and deputy chair is not available, what would we do from a special licence point of view? And that hasn't happened, and the risk is low, but the risk is there for council to not be able to have a district licence committee make a decision on something of that kind.
I just got a question on that, and I raised it with Kelly during the week, and I still have it now. And the motion as it stands, I don't recall that we spent a lot of time discussing the contingency for not having a chair or a and a deputy in that workshop. I might be wrong, but you know, this is sort of melded two provisions together in the motion. I just wondered about the wisdom or otherwise of allowing for, is it an outside sort of stand-in chair or deputy before we even know the makeup of our committee, you know? I know there's a strong preference. Yeah, so I perhaps should ask a question on that, what your views are on that. Is it a little bit preemptive to be discussing, to be having that provision for someone to come in from the outside? You know,
I think we've moved away from the provision of somebody coming from the outside.
It is, so it's not, sorry, maybe let's read that. So we've got, yeah, so the formation of the district licensing committee will still sit within, say, councillors or community board. That's what I had an impression.
Yeah, so that was the direction of the workshop.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
So we changed the report to suit.
So that's fine. I just wanted to clear that.
Sorry, Mr.
And so that would
Mr.
be,
Chair.
Yeah,
sorry, that would be members of council and or community board members if the council so wished.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I went offline before. Just
Yes, do you want to resume, Mr. Benny? Yeah, you have a quick question?
I think your question's been, I think what you were clarifying was my point, the necessity for having a there when it's considering outside the process. So that was my question, is the need to have it there and appointing outside. So I think you've clarified that.
Yeah, that's excellent. Right.
When it comes to it, I'm happy to signal I'm prepared to move and make a recommendation.
Round the table, do we have anyone? Yep, so thank you. It's noted Mr. Mayor, but when the time comes, yep. Councillor Cairns.
Just a question, thanks Mr. Chair. So how I understand it is that the district licensing committee is made up of 3 members. You currently have 5, so 3 would sit on a hearing, so 2 would step down, is that correct? So if you were to expand it to say 8, I sat in the back of the room of a hearing, I think it was last year, so if you had 8, potentially you might not sit on a hearing for 3 years. Would that be right if you had a committee of 8, a total of 8? So if there's a committee of 6, you might get 1 hearing every 2 years. Is that right, how I understand it?
So we have to have a list of DLC members, and the protocol is that when a hearing is required, so if there's no opposition to a licence or a manager certificate, the chair alone signs those off. If the chair could decide that they need to form a DLC to discuss that topic if they need further advice, or a hearing could be called depending on the aspects or complexities of it, regardless of opposition. Generally that doesn't happen, it's a rare occasion, but it can. And so the DLC list sits there regardless of how many you have on the list. The DLC is formed with 2 extra members and the chair. And one of the reasons for wanting to have further members is the fact that because of the changes to the legislation, we anticipate, and that's not just staff here, it's staff across Canterbury and the country in discussions, there will be more hearings because of the legislation changes. With crystal ball gazing, that might not happen, but if it does happen, we could be in a position where we've got a lot of hearings and not enough people to do the work. Is that a risk? Yes, it is. That's why this is on the table. But it's not the fact that people stand down from the DLC. They're put onto the DLC when there's a reason to have a hearing.
Thanks, Bill.
So, thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, have you combed the thoughts of what the existing DLC members are on this?
Well, the answer to the question, I've talked to the chair about this, and I suppose it's a separation from councillors should be involved with the discussion. The DLC members are just elected as DLC members for hearings and or for decision making. The makeup of the DLC could be compromised if the DLC members was choosing members for the DLC, in my professional opinion. Hence not asking the DLC members to have input into the discussion. The discussion's for councillors, not for DLC members, and there's a separation. And when you have all councillors are very much DLC made of councillors, that separation needs to actually always be remembered, I suppose.
But would it not be wise to consult the DLC members? They would know whether it's a broken system or not a broken system here, how much work's involved in it, the training involved on it. For my own personal thing, on the training side of it is you get 10 times better training when you sit on a hearing panel, an actual hearing on it, and we don't seem to get enough of them. So what's your views on that side of it?
Well, again, with respect, my professional opinion is that the council and councillors should, on reflection, we had a workshop, should be consulted, but the DLC members don't need to be consulted because they're appointed on a DLC. And I believe there would be a conflict if we asked DLC members who they would like on the, or who they should discuss, or whether there should be more or not. I actually just see that as a conflict. So professionally, I don't agree with that.
Would that not be a conflict from the chairman as well then?
It could be considered that, but this council set up the process of discussing with the secretary before my time. The chair and the secretary work together on discussions, and the chair's involved in decision making. So that's the way this council had decided that. So therefore, it's by default not seen as a conflict because of the way it was set up.
A question just following up there. Sorry, I will come to you, Councillor Goldsworthy, but while on the topic, this is a governance principle that would probably apply to any of our appointments, because that just the members do not formally get to have a specific say on the tenure or the nature of the tenure or the capability or etc. or anything. Is that what that's what you're telling us?
Well, that's my professional opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right, Councillor Goldsworthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one clarification on the back of that with C, where it says endorse recommendation to expand membership. So where it says the word maximum, does that mean that that's the biggest size of the pool that we can have, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 8 at all times?
Right. So after the workshop, we have put an extra 3 members, and so we talked about that at the workshop, and so the suggestion is from 5 up to 8, so it could be 6, 7 or 8, a maximum of 8.
So supplementary.
Sure.
Supplementary to that. So when it goes on to D with our recommendation to council, it's actually up for this committee itself to determine how many additional people to be appointed into that pool of 8.
That would be my recommendation, that this committee put to council how many they recommend.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, are you in a position to vote, or would you like to ask a question?
I just had a further question. My understanding this, we wouldn't, it's up to council, up to this body, but it's either C, and if we don't move C, then we'd move D. And if we choose not to put C, then you'd put D in there. That was my understanding. You wouldn't need to have C in there if you didn't wish. D would cover it, if that's the view of this body. I don't think the two are in tandem. Is that correct?
No, sorry, that's not correct. So they're two separate things. So expanding the membership is one question, and the second, so D relates to the fact that, and this is how it is currently, that all of the list members of the DLC are actually appointed as commissioners, which gives an option to, if the chair or deputy chair were not available, it gives the option to still form a DLC with one of the commissioners acting as chair. So they are two, they're not one or the other, we're seeking recommendations on both.
And it's currently as the recommendation stands to land, isn't it? So we'd have to change that to a law.
Oh, right, I understand. Yes, okay, that's fine. My question then in relation to this is further. The resourcing was raised at the time. I just want to be clear that this committee is adequately resourced. It has a secretariat funded to support the write-ups and its functions of decision making, and also the library that was mentioned by one of the members. Is that resourced and is that function now operational? If not, why not?
So the second question about the library, we're working through pulling out all of the legal opinions we've had in the past to put into a spreadsheet to be able to disseminate that to members, and we'll keep updating that, talking to the information management team, and they prefer that the access to Trim and our Tech One is kept with staff, so therefore we are just working through a different process to make sure that that library is available. But yes, it is in process to allow that library. However, also in our next training session, we'll be talking about all of the information that is available online for all decisions that have been made across any DLC and legal opinions that are out there for availability, which are on our website.
Okay, thank you. I'm prepared to move.
Thank you. Yes.
So I'm going to move C, and after with the C as A, B. Well, sorry, it should be B. Should be on the summary. It should be A, and then the C becomes the B. According to this, what I've got on the summary agenda here. Endorses the recommendation to expand the district licensing committee by up to, remove 3 and replace that with 2 members from 5 up to, and then change the 8 to 7 with elected members from council or community boards, and then at that point put a full stop. The rest comes out, and then D would become C. Approves the expansions of membership of district licensing committee by up to 2 members, the rest as is. Remove the E, and then F becomes E and G becomes, the staff will update that. the rest of how the measuring should be.
Thank you.
That's what I'm going to move.
All right. It's all understood and captured. Yeah. Okay. Do we have a second for that? I've heard it. Councillor Kent. Yes. Thank you. Open up for debate. Do you have any commentary?
Yeah, I'd like to speak if that's right, Mr.
Yes.
Chair.
Is that a reserve to speak, or are you going to speak now? Yeah.
No, I'd like to speak now. If
Thank
I can.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say that I appreciate the professional opinion provided, but I think that the capability, we've also discussed with the licensing committee, they were very clear themselves as to how many hearings there has presently been, and even if it is, it's likely to expand, they seem to be underused or utilised even in current form. It's going to take a bit of time for new members to be trained, and I accept that that takes time. But I don't want commissioners, personally don't want commissioners to be appointed from outside the membership. And if there is going to be an issue, then the issue of membership, and that was mentioned that there is going to be another report that comes back around terms and times, and I think that's appropriate with that's dealt with at that point. My personal preference would be that the chairing and the deputy chair functions do come from within that committee, where they're appropriately trained and are also very familiar with where our council's priorities are. I was asked very questions about the licensing committee this morning on my Compass FM interview, and it's come up because of what's going on presently in Christchurch, where they're looking at the very hours and operations, etc. I really don't want outsiders making decisions on things that are important to our community, and the issues of licensing. There are very strongly held views. I think the balance presently is working very well, and I think we've got a very experienced present committee. Now, who's to determine what happens in the future? We're not to know. In each term of council, this matter is considered as to who's on that committee. Whether we have the capability within our existing elected members, every term's a matter we need to consider. And at that point, if we need to look at outsiders, or perhaps as we have now, which is a bit of a hybrid, where we've had commissioners that have come in there that are effectively former elected members that have in actual fact continued on, then I'm relaxed about that because of their experience and connection to our district. So that's what I'm moving here, and I think that when it does come back to further consideration of council, we can look at the terms and whether we need to expand or do anything further at that point. I am very satisfied personally with how the DLC functions. I'm not consulted on any of those decisions, and neither should I, and neither should the council. That's them undertaking their responsibilities as they should, independently. So anyway, I just hope that carries support. I think that sort of picks up the concerns that were raised at our last workshop briefing on that matter.
The floor, anyone have further comments from the table? Councillor Redmond.
I'll reserve.
I'll reserve. I'm used to looking left. Spend too much time on that side of the table. Right. Oh, I'll be following Councillor Cairns and Blackie.
Right, thank you, Mr.
We'll reserve for Councillor Cairns.
I thought you'd been watching an earlier meeting today.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say I'm largely supportive of the Mayor's motion. I think the main issue, as I see it, for the DLC is succession, and we do need to plan for the future because none of us are going to be around here forever. I think 5 was a good number. I would be prepared to entertain 6. there will need to be new appointments anyhow with Wendy Doody retiring. So it seemed to me that we don't want a whole lot of new people coming in at once. If we can have a staggered progression, so somebody drops off and we have someone coming in. I've seen no signs that the caseload is increasing, and we don't know, it may increase. If it does increase, I think that would be a good thing for the existing committee, so they actually have more work and get more expertise and become more skilled in the process. So I don't see more cases or the workload as being an issue. Funnily enough, I was looking up alcohol.org.nz, which the Health Promotion Agency supports, and they recommend when you're forming your DLC to start small and add members later if necessary. And one of the reasons they said that is it's easy to appoint members but hard to get rid of them. So I had actually thought of being got rid of in that way. Anyhow, that was their recommendation. They also said commissioners should have the requisite skills to be appointed. And my impression was that new members we appoint may not necessarily be commissioners from day one, and that may be something Billy will address at some point. Councillors can be members of the DLC, and I'm sort of a confused councillor come commissioner because I am a commissioner. There's a little bit of uncertainty in my mind when that occurred or when my term expires, and maybe that's something Billy and I have been discussing, and I don't know what the answer to that question is really. I have a view, but it may not be correct. Interestingly, some years ago, Nick Harrison, the former regulation manager, suggested increasing membership of the committee to 6 and referred that younger members were needed. So that Nick's been gone a number of years, so that didn't happen obviously. So whatever happens, we are going to have at least one new member and possibly more, depending on what this committee and the council ultimately decide. There will be an additional cost, in my view, of training additional staff because people do receive a payment for training. So there may or may not be a budget for that, but there is a cost in upskilling members with training, and training is very important. So I think a gradual refresh of membership with staggered end dates would be a good outcome, whatever that may be. The other thing, the Mayor mentioned the library. When I mentioned the library, I was talking more about texts by authorities in case commentaries. Anyone can look up cases on the website, but it's the interpretation, and Alistair Sheriff is the editor or author, along with another person of one of the main texts, and they give their opinion on what this means and how it applies in other circumstances. So there is a cost of getting a subscription to one of those, and it's something in the order of maybe $3,000 to $5,000 per annum. I might be overstating it, but it's not cheap. But those resources would be very useful for the committee, whoever's on them. So anyhow, I don't get a vote here, but I'm generally supportive. I query the numbers, but apart from that, we do have to look to the future.
Councillor Blackie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Philip's covered pretty much what I wanted to say. I appreciate it's a balance between a thing that isn't really broken and trying to work out for the future with a bit of crystal ball gazing. My opinion, from formal and informal discussions with existing members, and the 5 number as it stands at the moment is okay. And as Philip said, there's no indications that the workload is going to increase. I certainly wouldn't have voted for 8. Bringing it down to 7, much the same argument in my opinion. You've got all that extra training. which is a lot of work for the incoming people, and the cost factor. And again, as has been mentioned, are they ever going to get to sit on the thing at the end of the day? Even at 6, I'm uncomfortable. I'll be voting against this. I'd rather it stay at 5.
Okay.
Yeah, by sitting on this committee, this licensing, I find it's a wee bit like motor racing. When you actually got a race car on a racetrack and you're practicing, sure you learn a wee bit, but there's nothing like a real race to learn that bits and pieces properly. And by sitting in a proper hearing is when you actually learn most of your trade and how you go about it. And unfortunately at the moment, even with 5 of us, we're all saying we don't get enough hearings. So we're not really doing that extensive training. It's like when you sit in a chairman there, you probably learn a lot more running a meeting than sitting on this side of it. So having the more hearings you can have, the more experience you get, the more knowledge you get, and it's far better than just sitting in a room training. So I actually personally think it's not broke at the moment. It works pretty good. The succession, as Councillor Redmond said, is the big problem. We will have succession coming on because there's one due to retire right now, and I think that we're continually following on by those retirements and everything going on. But the real experience there is by sitting on those hearings, and we don't get enough of them right now. And all of us are saying that basically on this licensing committee. So, and it's very, very important committee for people to have that knowledge, because you've got to be experienced and you've got to know the ins and outs of how the system works. So, and it would take, well, I actually believe probably 2 years for somebody to actually train up to get into that situation, particularly if they're not sitting on hearing panels. Just my thought.
I might just, before there's no other further comments, just
I had a question.
I have a question, so look.
Oh, just if you could report, I have a question. I don't want to interrupt debate.
Yes, good question. Thank you. Yes, it's an interesting point of the question of experience and capability. I can think in a different realm. I came into this council with no knowledge of council or governance. I wasn't on a community board. I've never sat in a hearing this like I only sat on one today. And I think to some extent we're trying to find that sort of Goldilocks number here, and there might be some qualms about 7 or 6 or whatever that number is. But I think we've touched on the laws of nature. In fact, there's no one's here forever, and that we need to find a pathway to train, appoint people for 3 to 5 years since within the actual time frame of current and future business and things like that. So with that, I'm not speaking for myself so much. I don't think we're really quite ready for some of these roles. I think we can attend to some concerns about resourcing and training and budgeting capability outside this motion. And I think Billy's alluded to it. We'll have subsequent reports. He's asked questions today about our training budgets, trying to ensure that they will be here. But ultimately, I don't think he is here quite many of these things. I'm certainly speaking for myself. So I think 7 might be a little bit of attention around that number. I think 8's too many. 7 I could certainly deal with. And deal with things, so moving step by step. Our next process is our next when we appoint people, yeah, we can deal with those things in turn. So, the question is me.
A question to Billy. It was in relation to a point that Councillor Redmond just made in debate. I was asking about the library, and you clarified that an electronic library. I was unaware of it necessarily being around textbooks that I can recall, and I have an extensive range of books myself, and I do prefer the written book. Are there textbooks available, and if so, can they be made available in a library format for the commissioners to be able to use? And if there isn't, can we obtain some so there is a resource for our not commissioners, but for our panel to be able to use?
So my reply to that is I'm not exactly sure what is being discussed from a library point of view. I think the best process for that is to discuss it in our next training, get some real clarity on what it is, how it could work, and then go from there. There is a budget to be able to supply a library of sorts, but I just need to get some clarification on exactly what that is, and very much we'll do that in our next training session.
Can I just clarify that to Kelly as the manager? From my point of view, I would certainly support, and if there is resourcing issues, let us know as a council so we can make sure there is some resource put there. So I guess there seems to be, I understand Councillor Redmond has asked this a few times, so I think Billy's right that there needs to be a workshop of the members to understand what it is they require. But if there's a resourcing issue, let us know, because that's something that needs to happen so that they've got adequate resources to do their job.
Thank you. And Councillor Goldsworthy, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting in support of this motion. But my interpretation of what's been put forward is that the beginning part with A and B, that's for the committee here to set the size of the pie. When it goes on to council, we determine how much filling goes into the pie. It's not necessarily that for the full term we need to have 5 on the district licensing committee, or 7, or whatever the number that we decide. But it gives us that flexibility to bring a few more numbers on board to train in those absences. I'm all for the idea of planning for succession. I think it's sensible to have a few extra people being able to be trained up on the sidelines. But again, I reiterate, we don't need to run with 7 on this committee for the entire length. So I think it's appropriate, and I think it's a good step forward. So.
We have a question here, reserved position. Yeah.
I was fortunate to sit on a DLC, or sat in the background of a DLC hearing last year, and I certainly realised that the committee members or the commissioners were extremely experienced. And I realised, and this is one of the reasons why I'm seconding this motion, is that there definitely needs to be succession planning. I totally agree with Chairman Tim that you learn as you go. Yeah, you're not fully qualified to actually sit on a DLC committee right from the start. And I certainly believe that I was happy with 6 or 7 committee members, certainly not 8, to be part of an apprenticeship to then effectively be at some point on a DLC committee. Yeah, I believe it's the 7 is a nice balance, and I agree with Councillor Goldsworthy that yeah, it's a transition. So that's the reason why I'll be voting in favour of this. Thank you.
Right. All right. In the absence of other questions, we've had debate. I'll put the.
Can I have a right of reply?
Oh, sorry.
I'll be very brief.
Please proceed.
Very brief. Just to pick up on a couple of remarks. So the textbook issue, I think, is very important, and ensuring that there's adequate resources for this committee so they can discharge their functions. So I don't want personally to see any barriers there for that to be undertaken. So if it needs further resource from the council, then please come back to us if required. But I would hope that the management have adequate resources to hand in order to look after the secretariat functions of our committees, which include the right resources. And having undertaken a number of functions myself over the years of decision making, I do prefer a textbook myself, so I certainly understand where that would sit, or written resources, but equally having electronic resources that are more on hand. So I think it's a bit of a hybrid of both in order to ensure that the function's right. And where that library is best placed, be up to the committee to work with staff on that, but may well be that the councillors' lounge area might be the appropriate place for that, but I'll leave them to determine that. Secondly, I've listened to the feedback around the numbers, and that's why I made clear in the words up to, if you read the original recommendation, up to sits there. I have changed that up to remains there, and in the revised wording, I added the words up to in there as well, so that it's got that. So I'm not fixed on whether it's 6 or 7 actually, but I just wanted there to be the flexibility should that be required. 6 is fine by me, but if it needed 1 extra, I wasn't going to die in the ditch if it requires a better functioning, but I certainly didn't support it going to 8, as had been the feedback we received from members. I do want to just acknowledge and put on record thanks to those who perform that function now. There's a lot of training required, keeping themselves up to speed, but also the role that our chair performs, and it was mentioned very strongly by the Deputy Chair, Jim Gerard, the function that the Chair does provide now, and I think that Neville does do an excellent and performs that really well. Having been a former publican himself, he has a lot of common sense, but also understands where this community's at. I think the committee gets that balance really well, and that carries a respect there. If what Billy's saying is correct and what they're picking up, then this committee may well be busier. So having that flexibility to go from 5 to 7 may well be necessary. And as I say, we can undertake a review on the membership at any time, but having adequate numbers resourced, trained so they can perform this function is important. Just like sitting on a resource consent hearing, those of us who I was in the past a trained resource consent commissioner, you can't sit on a resource consent hearing unless you've done your making good decision courses, because that's a requirement of that. To come on to council, there is no specific training, apart from you've got to pass your performance review, and you get on there, and I think our new members that come on every term do a really good job of learning the system, and then once they get themselves into it, you become more effective as you know how to work your way through the system. So there is a certain amount of learning on the job. I think this is a bit of a balance here, and I think what Billy's bringing to us is important for our consideration to make sure that our lab is serving, or our committee is serving our community the best it can. So I encourage members to support this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And this just vote on myself, the service is an amended motion. That's how we have to do it. Yeah, it's an amendment to the motion is repeated. Yep. Okay, so I'll put
just to clarify, Mr. Chair, it's not amended, it is the motion.
It is the motion, but
but I've changed the
wording
on the but it is.
Yeah, I just want
listed motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, as noted here. Right, I'll call for the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
No,
If you got that according, Councillor Lee?
whatever.
Whatever, I'll take it. I'll take it as a recorded, I think that's what now all practice. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Right. Good discussion. All right. Just move back to where I was. It must be report time. Portfolio report. Right, portfolio updates. Let's race it along. So we've got, I understand that our resource consenting numbers have been up in the past couple of months, and they're certainly noticeably up if anyone looks at the graphics compared to, say, year on year and where we were late last year. I think I understand from staff that some of this, economic environment factors, obviously the sensitivity to interest rates, just general sort of business and life confidence. So that's encouraging. Normally we would have 30 to 40 resource consent applications a month, so we're starting to sort of track up to that again. And developments are starting to happen again. A couple of interesting examples just to note. Development in the Ashley Coldstream area, and another one in the Oxford Road sort of area. I'm not sure what scale it's all. I think that's sort of small to medium, sort of not
About 20-ish lots.
20-ish lots each. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Solar farms are on the radar or in the spotlight, whichever you prefer. We've got, obviously we've noted before that out at the West Eaton Way and more remote areas, approval for Doncaster Road. We've got on Tram Road, there's an application for one in the Swannon School. We're just considering the way that that's notified, and staff just giving that consideration, whether it's limited notification, full notification, whichever it may be. So that's a topic of continuing interest. We've got, in the world of district planning hearings, we've got, I noted there's upcoming hearings where we're now in the stream 12 ENF.
Right now.
We're right amongst it, yeah. So a couple of the interesting aspects of that with those zone hearings. They pertain to our main townships, zonings around main townships, and there's also a separate hearing application that's the Dan Smith proposal out near the airfield. So, which is tracking along for quite some time, or moving along. I just want to note a couple of points, and I'll refer to them in my circulated emails to councillors, links to some reports. We've got one which relates to SNAs and the treatment of the national policy statement on biodiversity. I've received an officer's report for that one. I think there's some interesting aspects of that. I think my general comment would be that we shouldn't make any assumptions about SNAs, about the provisions yet, about whether they're going to be completely voluntary or compulsory. I think SNAs will still have a place, just in terms about how that fits with our national policy statement and our own district plans. So take a look at that one. Also, an officer's report which relates to the NDRS, which we spent a lot of time discussing as well. There's some basically we're at a point now where it appears we're considering is the word dropping back from 12 metres to 8 metres. This is 3x3 housing. again, the officer's report, if you haven't been following this, is some really interesting sort of summary of submissions there from some of our people in town. It's not to be necessarily taken for granted based on those submissions that people are universally against NDRS. I think that's, I think I'd be overstating it if I said that people were. There is some consideration with NDRS generally as to what has been happening in Christchurch in particular. You may recall at some stage that Christchurch objected to some of those height provisions, saying that their properties would lose their sun, the excess shading, because I think we've got to further latitude to the south. I think Christchurch has found that's actually been sort of rejected. It's going to have to be reassessed, and so some of those assumptions, particularly about the original 3-level housing, perhaps they might not stand. So I understand from talking to staff here that we're going to be looking at that quite closely, and that where Christchurch moves on this, because it'll be relevant to us as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting field. We've got the National Policy Statement on Housing Capacity. This is probably the subject of a report from staff. I'm just sort of flagging it with you now. Consideration of whether the staff should have some discretion to make the delegated authority or discretion to make changes to our housing capacity sort of figures or estimates. So that's just something to look ahead to. So that's a very important part of our council business. I think we've got, leave it at that. Take a look at those links to those reports. Thank you. Right, Councillor Keynes. Goldsworthy first. Yeah, with you.
And a pleasure.
Yeah.
So just starting off with regulation, some of you may have heard, but for those who haven't, there's been a reserve judgment made on tiny homes. So tiny homes on wheels, as we consider the building under the Act, with the exception of if the tiny home is built on a trailer. So
Clear as mud.
it's getting a little bit clearer. So yes, there's been a ruling, and obviously we're finally hopefully getting one step closer to the end of this. Food compliance, after we brought it in-house late last year, the teams managed to get on top of the workload that was left by the contractor. Pool compliance, there was a wee bit of a backlog, just due to staffing, but typically it's been done over the warmer months. The staff have just been working on it all year round, so we're going to catch up onto that hopefully by mid-next year-ish. And civil defence exercise on Saturday, there was a bit of a mixed reception from the public. Some of the hubs were actually quite well patroned. I managed to visit Custer along with Councillor Fulton, except on the other end of the exercise. There wasn't too much community interest, so the civil defence teams, they're aware that they'll be well utilised during the case of an event, but it's kind of hard to encourage training in peacetime, as it would seem. There's a hub engagement coming up at Swannon School on the 3rd of September, 5 p.m. Steady progress being made to achieve the 5 skeleton screws for the EOC to stand up, just to provide a little bit of rolling and rest for those that are standing in EOC over the course of an emergency. And I'll be attending the South Island Emergency Management Conference in September, so I'll be able to report back to you on that as well.
Thank you.
Can we answer?
Question? Yeah, do we have a question? Well, Martin, I'll go to you.
Just that tiny house built on a trailer, so if it's built on a trailer, you don't need a permit for it? Is that correct?
Yes.
So you can build it on a trailer, take the site, remove it from the trailer, you're not doing a permit. Is that the way to interpret it? Is it being built on a trailer, or it has to be on a trailer all the time?
I believe it's if it's manufactured on the trailer at factory.
So not built on a trailer, it just has to be a trailer.
Slightly more clarification.
Yeah, that's right. So if it is built on a trailer and stays on a trailer like a caravan does, and it's got like the tail lights and the electrical and all the things that enable you to at any point in time hook up to it and move it, that's not considered a structure under the Building Act. But if it is something that could be temporarily on a trailer and just moved around to a location and then taken off that trailer and erected somewhere, that is considered a building that requires a building consent, and that's from the recent ruling from the district court.
That's what I thought it was, just saying built on a trailer. The other question is, do you know if the civil defence vehicle's been fixed yet? It's been broken for weeks and weeks.
I have not received an update.
Yes, Councillor Hens, and
I
then
have a question. So in terms of the trailer, it has to go for a wider fitness on a regular basis. So will it actually will have to maintain that wider fitness ongoing to be always a trailer as a tiny home? Would that be correct, Kelly? Because the reason why I ask is that I went to see a tiny homes builder in Chertsey, and they have the chocks, or the wheel chocks can be taken in to get the wider fitness and then brought back. So that's all that is required to be warranted. It's the wheels and that sort of thing. So long as that's fine, then the house doesn't need to be moved all the time. It's just those wheels and that part that moves. So would that still comply?
It's been a couple of weeks since I've read the decision from district court, and I don't think it commented on the status of a warrant. I can check on that. From my recollection of when I had read it, it didn't actually cover this scenario that you're talking about specifically. And I guess and this is just my interpretation of what the court said, and probably needs to be tested. But I would have thought if it's a situation where the structure can be, I'm not sure, I can't quite visualize how the structure is isolated with then the trailer being taken off and then come back in without it then being considered an actual building, but may need to get more information on something like that to provide further clarity.
Okay, I can get you that information.
thank you. No, should we just we're just going to queue.
I have a question.
Yes, but see.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
On just on the points that colleagues have just asked questions on, there was a determination of MB on contrivance on wheels. Does district court decision at all put that determination at risk? And have we got any advice on that? And the reason I ask that is because if we haven't already received multiple emails from an individual, we may well be getting those. And have we got ourselves, because I remember that's what started off a whole flurry of communication in the first place, was around that matter. Just want to be clear on that, and where we stand on that matter.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, what determination are you?
There's a determination by MB on what a contrivance on wheels was. So in other words, what a tiny home was on wheels. And so there was an applicant that lives within our district that was challenging us on the basis on which that was being considered. I just want to understand is if now there's been a district court decision, does that at all put that determination by MB at risk?
So,
and have we taken any advice on that, and if not, why not?
So my understanding, there's two determinations that related to cozy homes within the district. So one was a specific unit, and that was the first determination by MBIE. It was quite narrow in scope of that determination, and that one found, I think, against what the council had assessed. I am less familiar with the specifics of that one. Then there was a second determination that was based off of an inspection that underoccurred at where the units were being built, and there was about 13 or so units being constructed at the time, and a notice to fix was issued. So related to that, there was an initial determination that found that they were, I believe the determination found that they were vehicles, and then that was challenged in the district court, which found that they were structures covered under the Act. So I guess this is a long answer to say yes, there are going to be consequences, in particular for the manufacturer, the ongoing manufacture of those types of units within the district. And yes, our legal advisors have been involved in this whole process.
So are they? I guess I can have an offline conversation with Kelly about this, but I just want to, I guess, just be clear that we're not at risk. So what we're relying on is not at risk because of a district court decision, and whether that's something that MB are considering as a result of the district court decision, and whether or not they're looking to challenge that decision if they can.
So no, my understanding is that the district court decision comes in over top of the determination, so it basically overturns the determination. If the, I'm not sure what the right term is, but hopefully you'll understand what I mean when I say the applicant, if they wanted to further challenge the district court, their option, I believe, is to go to the high court, and that's something that they can do. I have not heard any indication as if that's something they are considering or not. But I believe that, council's approach and how we've done this has been confirmed through district court. So I don't think there's any specific risk that we need to be considering right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Question, Councillor Williams.
There's more of an answer. Helping, because I used to do warrant of fitness being inspector. You cannot get a warrant of fitness for a tiny home if it's wider than 2.55, and most of them are 3.5. So I don't know where they'll be getting a warrant if they're getting them for them at the moment, because you can't get them for over 2.55. You're not allowed them on the road. End of story. So that's.
Yeah.
No, I realise that, but.
Thank you. We've got to treat it as a comment, as an institution. That's certainly not council policy. That's probably the way to describe it. Right, so moving on, portfolio holder, Cairns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've already seen through my portfolio update. I just failed to add in Honeybell Lane, which is just across the way. The walking surface has now been complete, and the planters and the seating have all been installed. They're just waiting for the planters and the electrics to be hooked up. But that's looking pretty good down that laneway. And of course, you've got Creamer going in there, which is the coffee shop, which is still being installed. And you've also got Postie Plus, which is already open there, and then you've got the travel action as well open in there. But apart from that, you'll see the update already in there. Further to the changes to the parking signage in Rangiora, I've heard back from today that there'll be comms going out to the retailers in regards to ensuring that their staff don't park all day in the parks, and it seems to have been in Percival Street where most of the staff were parking there as opposed to the high street. So comms will be going out via that to make sure that they don't park there all day, particularly on Saturday, busiest day. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Question, Councillor Williams.
This is a nice one. I'm just wondering, seeing we've had one of our seats in the other lane burned, do you know if you've talked to the staff whether they consider of painting them with that fire retardant paint in there? Because there is a fire retardant paint that's glass, so are we considering doing that? It's not expensive to do that in some of these iconic settings and other structures we put around the community.
Thank you for your suggestion, Councillor. I would imagine that that's an operational matter, and I'm assuming that the staff will do the best that they can. But I certainly can pass on your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a real quick question. I might not be so much in your town centre where I might be more community board, but I noticed I was talking to Edward Lazzetti just a couple of weeks ago, and he was unaware that Honeywell Lane was going to be named what it was, and which, you know, that's their family history. And I just wondered, when we make these decisions, do we ever have reference to the families involved? It didn't seem, perhaps someone could answer that for me. He wasn't too concerned about it, he was quite surprised, and he sort of said, well, okay, well, why have you chosen that lane? Why is it across the street from us, and what relevance has it got? So, maybe another forum we can answer that.
It's a good question. I actually thought it came via the Radio Ashley Community Board.
Yes,
So
there were several options, weren't there, but I don't know, I really seen it, just noticing it. But I just thought it's unfortunate with a long-standing family that they just weren't aware.
Maybe something, maybe we should actually communicate that via the staff back to his family to let him know as to the rationale or the reasons why that name was chosen for the particular lane. Something like that.
Just some sort of
somebody should make
communication.
contact with them.
Yeah.
Just let them know. But thank you for that.
No, that's all right. Okay. I think that's a wrap. I think, as I say, it's probably not the formal term. Right, no, not quite. I've got a question. Any? Quick. No questions under standing orders. No urgent general business. Next meeting, District Planning and Regulation Committee will be held on 17th of September 2024, and meeting closed about 8 minutes past.